Well, we're doing it.
It's time for the pre-stream, pre-show, pre-all conversation.
Pre.
Pre.
Everything coming through all right?
Yes. Oh, I figured out what happened last week. Somehow the stream, what was it? YouTube wasn't working?
Yeah.
I think it was YouTube crapped out on me. It's because it started streaming early somehow. I don't remember hitting the stream option. So it was streaming me setting up and just kind of doing my thing. I'm like, that's not cool. So I had to delete it and upload it.
Oh, like it had 20 minutes extra just streaming on there that you had to edit out or something?
Well, no, it didn't. It ended when I tried to start our live show. It ended.
Oh, weird.
So yeah, I don't know how it streamed out, but I've got a little dome going on too because I haven't actually had the top of my hair trimmed since I'm trying to grow it out. So it's it's taller at the top because of the crown.
Interesting.
So I've got a little mini mohawk for you today.
When's it coming back? When we bring in that mohawk back?
Maybe I should just grow it out and I'll push it together faux hawk it or something.
Perfect.
Yeah. Let's see what happens.
Gotta get it done. It'll be good.
Yeah. Good stuff. How's the weather down in San Francisco?
It's overcast, a little cold.
All right. Just the way you
like it?
Rained
yesterday. It's not raining. Yeah, well, I have to say, maybe I'm changing a bit. Who would have thought on a podcast about change? But, it's nice having the sun out every once in a while.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Did you get many trick-or-treaters?
We did not, actually, but I went out for a walk. This is how old I am. I went out for a walk with a friend, totally forgetting that Sunday was like Halloween. Because you think of, people celebrating it on Saturday when you have jobs on Monday and stuff like that. But when walking around in part of San Francisco, it had tons of trick-or-treaters. It was absolute chaos.
Ah, very cool.
I wouldn't recommend it.
It's like
way too many kids.
Yeah, it's like D Street in Petaluma. People there's one place that builds a ship, like the front end of a ship in their yard. It's like 15 feet up in the air.
Oh, cool.
They go serious down in that area. It's all the old Victorian, the old Victorian houses where they actually have a little bit of land, not a lot, but that whole section, it's crazy. It's a mob. It's where all the cool kids go to hang out.
It's the destination for all the kids looking for candy.
There you go. The candy destination. It's not Candyland, folks. It's D Street on Petaluma and wherever it was in San Francisco.
Yeah. Presidio Heights, up around there. Lots of very nice houses in that area. Huge packs of kids running around and their parents, standing back there, like walking around with drinks in their hands and stuff. I just like walking around there because the houses are so beautiful. I mean, they're huge. They're so expensive and really cool to look at. And the area is nice and you can get a nice view of the Golden Gate Bridge on top of the hill.
Oh, very nice.
Didn't anticipate the fact that it would be a popular spot for Halloween.
Right.
And it was.
Alrighty. Yeah, my parents, years ago when they still lived here, they walked. There's a neighborhood that was within walking distance of where we lived, and they were like, okay, we're going to buy a house there. And so that's where they took their walks, and they'd always check out. And sure enough, it was like 5 years later, bought a house in the neighborhood.
Good visualization. Yeah.
Visualizations. Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is the No Fucks Given podcast. I am your co-hosting host, Ryan Perry, with my buddy, Will Cordonley. For
It
those
is.
that are not interested in Halloween and walking stories and all of those types of things, that's okay. We're actually going to change it because we're going to talk about change today.
We are. But who doesn't love a good walking story? Probably most people, actually. I mean, even if it wasn't my walking story, I probably
Yeah.
wouldn't enjoy it all that much either.
Well, it depends on the storyteller, I think. Some people are just naturally gifted or have invested a lot of time and energy in becoming great storytellers. And it's like, who knew you could make a great story out of walking?
Yeah.
So,
You just have to talk about the emotions, I guess. And yeah,
yeah,
you can learn how to tell a great story. I'm
right.
still at the very beginning of that. I would not call that a natural skill of mine, but it
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
Yeah. I can talk sometimes, but yeah, tell a story and keep people engaged. That's a whole nother thing. So,
Yeah.
um, that's one of the reasons why you're here. We get to,
Yeah.
play off each other and don't have to figure out what the entire conversation is for the entire show. And speaking of the show, we are talking about change. And so as we're talking about, we knew what we wanted to talk about, but then we got to write the description and all that type of fun stuff. And
Hmm.
Will, you came up with a great description if you recall what it is.
God, I don't remember what I
Yeah.
said.
All
Huh.
right. I was hoping you would because I've already posted it. But essentially so it's not visible. I'm looking at the other screen
I
here and
remember
I'm
what we're
like,
talking. The
yeah, it had to
trouble
do
with
with the
getting what
feeling.
you want. That's what we're
Yeah.
talking about here.
Right. And my thought was, if everybody had what they wanted, this would not be a problem and we wouldn't have to talk about it. But obviously there's a lot of people
Mhm.
that say I want, I want, I want, and yet they may not be successful in getting what they want. And so you were kind of taking it, I think, to the next level in the sense that as you start to get what you want, do you notice a change in feelings where it kind of shifts
Mhm.
from feeling good to maybe not feeling good, maybe anxious, nervous, whatever it is that you experience specifically, because it's going to be unique for each person. And really just kind
Yeah.
of talking a little bit more about that and some of the safety patterning that goes on in the
Mhm.
systems to protect us.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a tricky one because there's kind of a lot of underlying baseline understandings and information that can go into it. But
Right.
the big general idea is if your nervous system has learned that good feelings are calculated as threats inside of yourself for
Hmm.
whatever reason, then getting what you want can kind of be problematic sometimes
Right.
in a very small way, like a tinge of anxiety to, sometimes depending on the person, catastrophic, just depending on
Right.
how hard they've pushed against their own system and to make something happen and all the ramifications that can come from that.
Right.
But why would a nervous system calculate or equate good feelings with threat or bad things? That's kind of a bigger thing that we talk about a fair amount here, but
Hmm.
has to do with childhood development and growing up in certain kinds of environments where maybe being excited or happy or having good things kind of either brought something somewhere between complete neutrality or like lack of acknowledgement to almost where feeling good actually provoked the caregivers in a negative way.
Right. Well, and I think, yeah, I
And
think there's kind of like there's two categories, if you will, or two verticals, two boxes, if
Mhm.
we were because it is such a big topic. Like, okay, how can we kind of constrain it? We're going to have to generalize to a
Mhm.
large degree here. I think one of the boxes is safety. So
Yep.
there's all kinds of safety patterning, and I think that's kind of what you were alluding to. And
Mhm.
so safety patterning is if you don't have the right to have money, as an example, if that's just a built-in safety patterning for whatever it is in your system, having money makes your system, your kind of your nervous system, your critter brain, The
Mhm.
parts of you that are responsible for keeping you alive that really don't give a shit if you're happy or sad, if you're fed or, well, they probably want you to be fed, but they just don't. It's kind of a black
Mhm.
and white system. It's survivable or not survivable. And once a program is put in place, I don't know a better word for it. It kind of is
So
a master command, if you will, in the system. And
absolutely.
and any violation of that master command equals death. And again, these are very broad generalizations just to try and simplify it and
Mhm.
contain it. So I think that's one is safety patterning, and then the second one that I think of would be belonging, and that is so. I've mentioned this a couple of times before that a child is guilty who does not steal in a family of thieves.
Mhm.
So it sounds a little counterintuitive that a child who does not steal is guilty. However,
Mhm.
if you live in a family of thieves, then that family is going to place that child as guilty because they may not be trustworthy because they now don't belong in the family system to some degree. Again, these are really broad generalizations.
Yeah. And then belonging is a really interesting and complicated topic because it's kind of based on we're like, well, you're sitting there like, what do you mean? I'm 34 years old. Why would it matter if I belonged with my family back then?
Right.
They were mean to me or they're a bunch of dicks or
Sure.
whatever, or my family when parents are the most wonderful people in the world, whatever it comes
Mm-hmm.
up for for the person,
Right.
it is what it is. But we have to remember that our minds collect ages. We don't grow out of them. So
Right.
sometimes, depending on the context and depending on our own specific, what we call like triggers or things, sometimes we get regressed or encapsulated back to younger parts of ourselves, even though we're like a fully fledged adult at this point. You can think
Mm-hmm.
about the most recent or ugliest fight you've had with a significant other. How old were both of you when you started yelling at each other?
Right.
This is the kind of territory we're talking about when your mind just gets like, I don't know, I just kind of lost capacity to be rational and be cool,
Mm-hmm.
calm, and collected and be,
Right.
the grown adult that I am. And we're just off and running.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing we're talking about here. So when a positive thing happens in our life and it gets calculated as threat, either because it feels scary in our nervous system or it will make us feel parts of us feel like we've lost belonging in our family, that's still the part that's running at the most primal, like has primacy,
Right.
like in regards to this activity. So it's a really strange experience to have getting a positive thing in your life happen and then
Right.
having that feel bad or anxiety
Right.
provoking or like a sadness comes up. But there's reasons for this. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like doesn't happen in a black box.
Right.
And
And
that's what we want to unpack here today.
yeah, and I think that's really nicely said is that these are all patterns. And when you can start to identify patterns that show up, then
Mhm.
you can start, you have more agency and choice. But if there isn't the
Yeah.
awareness of the pattern, then it's just, oh, this is just life being strange, or this is the way it always is. Things always start going well, and then the other shoe drops. There's a reason why that happens, and it's not just by happenstance. It's
Yeah.
programming in your system that is designed for safety. And I think when it kind of taken belonging to another step, if you've ever seen a movie or show, or maybe you've had this example in your own life where you've started to have success, and it could be somebody who's maybe becoming a really good athlete, and they are extending beyond what everybody else in their community, maybe even their good friends, or somebody who becomes a singer or decides to go to college, is really smart, However, if they're hanging out with and a large population of their direct peers are not necessarily quite as smart as them, they then are viewed as being different. And they
Yeah.
themselves view themselves as different. And they go, oh my gosh, I have all these great opportunities. I've got all these great things that I can do. I would like to go and do something. And yet now they feel pressure from family, from close relatives, from friends, and all of that. It's like, hey, smarty pants, who do you think you are? What makes you so special? And
Yeah.
so it shows up in all kinds of different ways. Internally, reference where we feel a little awkward, like, oh, maybe I'm not worth. Maybe it wouldn't be good for me to go and do this really cool summer camp or whatever it might be, because the family is going to judge me or look at me differently. And how do I do that if I don't belong? Because they've been my sole source of survival since I was an infant, since I was born.
Yeah. Completely. And that's a tough predicament if, you know, let's say go in with what you're talking about here. It's a really nice, simple example, pursuing some cool academic opportunity or a camp opportunity. If it means losing belonging with all of your friends, that's a tough choice, right?
Right.
If there's envy that comes up or anything that like of that nature, it just gets really challenging.
Yeah.
And it takes a strong person and kind of a determined person to move forward in the face of that,
Right.
which has its own utility in and of itself, although that's a hard pill to swallow, right?
Mm-hmm.
You choose this even though it might mean tough times ahead with family, loss
Right.
of peers, all this kind of stuff. It really is a signal to your own subconscious and your own system who you are and what you really want,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's tough. So it has a usefulness to it as well, even though mostly we're just talking about emotional pain here,
Right.
which comes from cool things. So yeah, there's a social external element to it that plays a huge role in all this. And our original social group, our family, right?
Mm-hmm.
The OG social group, if when you were young and it was just you and the parents, that imprints inside of us and causes us to make all kinds of decisions about life and about ourselves and about how things work and about our capabilities and about what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And when we violate that stuff that still runs inside of us, that causes friction. It causes problems inside of us, in addition to it potentially causing problems outside of us as well.
Right. Yeah, very much so. And I think especially at an younger age where you really haven't fully been able to, and maybe fully is not the right word, but be able to figure out who you are to some degree, then it's like, well, hold it. What do you have as a reference point of what is acceptable? What can I do? How much is it okay to take? And say, but this is who I want to be. This is what I want. And it's like, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, especially when family's involved. And those are very strong emotional pulls. Even if people have trying relationships with their family, that family bond is still so very strong that it can pull people in. And then, the interesting thing is sometimes it'll flip polarity and it'll actually push people away. And how or why that flip is, we have no idea, but it's interesting that once it gets triggered, it's just, it's kind of like, fuck you, family. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. And those individuals typically will spend the rest of their lives proving their family wrong. And that creates all kinds of problems also.
That's a really tricky one too, because it's rewarded in our society, right? If you're out there just kicking ass and taking names and doing all these things and finding external, I don't know what you want to, success, whatever you want to call it, in whatever
Right.
endeavor it is. But if it's all based out of giving the finger to your family of origin, that's just going to leak out in all kinds of problematic
Right.
ways in your heart and in your mind, and in all kinds of I don't know, it's almost too hard to explain because there's so many
Yeah.
different ways it can go. But no matter, I guess as a side note, this is kind of an overarching thing that I do, and I'm sure Ryan does when he works with people, and it doesn't get said out loud a lot of the time, at least not by me. But no matter how awful or terrible or just like despicable some families are that people grow up in, and they really are. It's like that's what jail's for. When people break the law and do horrible things, they should be behind bars because they're dangerous. That being said, it's always better, no matter what, whether even if you're in contact or not in contact with your family, the way that the love and energy flows in these family systems, like, it's just better to be in a state of like rapport and okayness with the family system. And that doesn't mean you have to hang out with them, and it doesn't mean you have to even like them necessarily, and it doesn't
Hmm.
mean that what happened was okay or justified in any way. It just means that the people that you are half of, right? You are 50% your mother and 50% your father, and that's how it works for everyone on the planet. Period. No questions asked. Maybe in the
Hmm.
future it'll be different in a science lab or something, but
Right.
in 2021, that's how it works. Even if you don't know these people, you're still half of them. And the
Right.
more you deny or cast out or push against what you are, the more problems you have in your own life. So it's a
Yeah.
tricky thing. It's
Yeah.
it's as our mentor says, being human's trickier than it looks. So
Right.
this
Yeah.
would be a big part of that as well.
Right. Yeah. And it
And this
it's
is
it.
only one of the reasons why getting what you want can not feel great sometimes. There's so many
Right.
others. It's like,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah. And ultimately, I think what we're trying to showcase and express is that there's other things going on that we're not necessarily aware of as people in these meat suits. We're not necessarily aware that there's these other programs running internally on their own subsystem that we're not consciously aware of. And so if you become consciously aware that there are these programs running, then you can start identifying them. And when you identify them, again, you have more agency for choice. And that's ultimately, the solution to the problem. Well, how can I have what I want and be okay with
hmm
it? Is identifying and being very clear with what it is that you would like, identify some of those those safety patternings, the invisible beliefs. Oh, I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm really not smart enough. What if I go to camp and yeah, I'm the dumbest kid there and I get laughed out of school? You talk to their
Yeah.
good friends that are there to support them, and they're like, "What are you talking about? You're like the smartest kid that we've ever met." You know, and you see this with artists, and even I know Garth Brooks he retired for like 10 years, and he
Oh, really?
was yeah, he retired for a long time. I could be wrong with 10 years, but he was out of the music business for a while, and when he came back, he was genuinely nervous that will the public accept him again. And it's like,
Hmm.
hello, you're Garth Brooks. Why would we not accept you? Come on now. So, if you're a country guy like I am, who had the
hmm
pleasure of seeing Garth Brooks in concert and was just totally blown away by his performance, it's like, why would we not want you back? Assuming you're pretty much the same guy, you haven't turned into Dr. Evil or something. It's like, yeah, of course. And he was genuinely humbled when people received him. But this affects all levels. I guess that's what I want to get across, is that this affects all levels of all people. Your
Yeah,
smartest
interesting.
people that seem to be the most competent. I remember watching John Asseroff when he started his I forget, neuro gym program, I think is what it was called. It's been a few years now,
Yeah.
but he started presenting himself as, look, I'm an expert in neuroscience. I'm going to be talking about
Mhm.
this. And it was a big jump for him because
Oh,
now
okay.
it's not just, hey, hey, I've got this system that works and you should go try it. I've got these classes you can take. Let me help you be successful. Now it's
Mhm.
like, look, I'm an expert in this study in neuroscience. I've been studying it forever, and I want you to listen to what I say because I am competent in what I'm saying. And for him, that was a big shift, and it was a little scary for him because he's like, but what if I do say the wrong thing? What if, you know, we find something else out that we didn't know about, and I've been leading these people down the path that wasn't productive. And
Okay.
it was
Got
like,
it.
now I'm saying I'm the man, essentially, follow me because I can help you. But it was at a much
Mhm.
bigger level. And it's what he wanted, but there was all this fear but he had enough knowledge at that point to be able to say, okay, I recognize the patterning that's coming up. What is
Mhm.
the safety patterning? What is it that the system is trying to protect me from? And let me dig into that. Let me kind of lean into that uncomfortable feeling and
Mhm.
figure out what's going on in my system. And it's kind of like if you grew up driving around town, wherever it is that you live, you get really comfortable. And then if you have to drive somewhere for the first time, maybe you've always driven in the country, now you got to drive in a big city. I remember driving to San Francisco my first time. My goodness, talk about an overwhelming and scared experience because it was a
Yeah.
new boundary for my system. And so you got to push those boundaries, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And then, but as you do it, as I drove in the city a couple of times, I'm like, okay, I can handle this. Not a big deal. I just don't
Mhm.
want I don't want to drive a big truck. And when I see people driving those buses, that the accordion buses, where it's like two buses attached to each
Oh
other,
yeah.
I'm like, hell no.
Yeah.
There's like no way I would ever want to drive one of those things.
Mhm.
It just sounds and feels dangerous in my system, even though logically I'm sure I could do it. I don't know how many
Yeah.
cars I would hit, but I'm sure I could do it.
Yeah. You could.
I'm sure I could do it.
As long as you didn't have to, yeah. As long as you weren't accountable for all the cars that you hit, you
Yeah,
could totally
exactly.
do
Yeah,
it.
totally could.
Easy.
Yeah, yeah.
Walk in the park.
Yeah. What's the? Gosh, I can't think of the game where people just
Grand
drive
Theft
around
Auto.
and Grand Theft Auto. Yeah,
Yeah.
just do a Grand Theft Auto thing. So, anyhow, I feel like I
Sky
talked too
stuff.
long.
Yeah. No, no, it was great. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I
Yeah.
mean, part of it is when you get what you want, right? In their John Azaraf example, sometimes it means coming with greater responsibility and
Mm,
greater unknown, right?
all
He's
right.
stepping into a position of leadership and authority, which inherently comes with, I don't know, all kinds of things, but kind of mainly just the fact that you've never been there before. So
Right.
then your mind can start filling in, what if I mess up? What if
Right.
something gets disproven, in the scientific realm?
Right.
All these things.
All the way
That's part of
the
why it
yeah.
might.
I was gonna say all the way the
Mhm.
shoe could fall, right? All the way the cookie could crumble. All those
Mhm.
different analogies that are out there.
Yeah, and our minds are designed to do that to a certain degree. Some people do it way too much, like go future negative and think about all the ways the future is going to turn negative, and
Right.
that has a utility too, right? If you're doing QA for architects building huge buildings and stuff like that, that's pretty important. That can be really useful.
Right.
But it can also kind of be a torturous way to go through life if it's really throttled up at like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 of only being able to think about bad things happening in the future.
Right. Especially if you're
But
just
to a
trying to
certain
go to
degree,
the
our
grocery
minds,
store.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What if they're out of everything you want?
Right.
Then
Even
what?
though it's never happened in the last 5 years, going to the grocery store.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I forgot the other thing that came up, but yeah, the newness is a big part of like why it can feel uncomfortable and just disorienting. to arrive in a reality that you wanted and were striving for. I think there's a lot of, there's a lot that's been said in the past and is said now about how it's not the overarching idea that it's not the destination, it's the journey to it.
Right.
I think there's a lot of validity to that, although not going to knock about ever getting to your destination. Of course, that's important as well. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people find that despite all our best efforts and frustrations and annoyances at maybe the way that it is, like the striving and the working towards things sometimes has the juice in it much more than actually getting the thing.
Right. Yeah.
And you hear
And how
this a
many?
lot with successful entrepreneurs who sell their companies, and you know that's fun for a week or two, and then all of a sudden they fall into massive depressions, or
Right.
into their minds fall into the void of, well, what now? I spent my whole life doing this for the last 2 to 10 years or longer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to do with myself anymore.
Right. Yeah,
So
because
there's
vacationing may not be safe. Right. If you grew up with the
Mhm.
mindset that you have to work equals survival, and you just remove the work, how does the system know it's going to survive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. I have a tiny bit of that, and I think a lot of people do as well. But the inability to enjoy a vacation, that's a little different than what we're talking about here, but it's certainly
Hmm.
an interesting phenomena where there's just you're laying
Well, it
there on
could
the
be part
beach
of,
enjoying yourself, and it just doesn't feel right for
right,
some
right.
reason.
But
Something's just wrong about it. But
it could be part of what is it that you would like. Oh, okay. Well, part of what I want is actually to work less. I would like to be successful at not working as much and maybe enjoying a relaxing vacation. And so, okay, well, what is it about the idea of vacationing that doesn't feel good?
hmm,
And, again, that if that's something you want, but you can't seem to get it, there's some safety patterning in there that is telling you that this is not safe. And when we say safe, it doesn't always have to make logical sense why it is or isn't, because that
mhm.
subsystem that's really driving the emotions is not based on logic. It's based on associations that it made typically years and years and years and years ago when you were, possibly still in diapers. And just think about the brain of a 1 year old or a 2 year old. It really doesn't have, there's not a lot of logical connections going on at that time.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah, when we say unsafe, that just kind of means the calculation inside of your system doesn't fully accept something as completely positive for whatever
Right.
reason. And there's, again, we're kind of cooking through all the reasons why that might come up in someone's system, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
there's no way of really generalizing. I mean, there are some generalizations. I think one of them you could say lottery winners. How many people have won
mhm,
the lottery? We would have to look up the stat, but I think it's over 50%. I'm sure probably blow through their winnings within X number of years.
y- yeah, I don't know. I think the percentage is much higher than that, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I think it's much more than 50%.
Yeah.
It's the perfect example. I mean, it's really classic, but it's kind of it's so perfect, that's why it gets used all the time. The
Right.
person wins the lottery, and whatever the percentage is, somewhere between 50 and 90% of lottery winners, they end up either exactly where they were or in a worse place
Right.
within something quick, 2 to 8 years, something like that. That's the system being completely overwhelmed with something positive and having to get back to its homeostatic, like, set point, essentially.
Right.
We find ways to sabotage ourselves or make bad decisions, or all kinds of bad stuff comes up. It's an interesting one too, because a lot of lottery winners, one of the biggest stressors is, like, you know family members and friends, like, all asking for money and for
Mm-hmm.
loans and stuff like that
Right.
now.
Where yeah, and
It's
this
crazy.
expectation that that they deserve it because
Hmm.
they're related. Yeah, I found a quick article. Don't know if this is true or not, but it states, why do 70% of lottery winners end up bankrupt?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to it. I was watching one where the guy, if anybody asked him for money, he gave it. He just gave it away. It's like, all right, if you ask for money, I'll give you money, and he was totally fine with that. And it's not that, oh, there's, I would assume it's not that there's so much money that I could give it all away and I will never run out. It's not like this, magic lamp
Mhm.
type of thing where you just keep on getting more wishes or more money. It's just the fact that having that much money feels uncomfortable. In fact, a fun little thing, if you all want to do it around money, is if you think about how much money you currently make right now, whatever that salary is that you take home, or whatever your gross is, 60, 100, 20,000, $250,000, whatever that number is, think about it and how does it feel to have that much money? And when we talk about feelings, it's not, oh, well, I'm excited because I can take vacation. Vacations aren't a feeling. Being excited is a feeling. And then if you take that number and you double it, how does it feel now? So imagine yourself in your mind's eye having that much money. What are you doing? Where are you living?
Mhm.
Are you in a house? Are you taking a vacation? If you are taking a vacation, where are you vacationing to? What kind of car are you driving? How does the family or other people in your life, how do they feel about that? And just notice how it feels. And then take that number and double it and see how it feels. Take that number and double it, see how it feels. At some point,
Mm.
the system is going to start freaking out and it's not going to actually feel good to say have $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, 10, 20, $100 billion. Is it okay for you to have $1 billion? At some point, the system's going to start going, error, can't compute, not safe, something's wrong. May it be a belonging issue or a safety patterning, but something's going on in the system. And if
Mhm.
that is counterintuitive to what you logically think would happen, totally okay, because that's the way the mind works. It doesn't, very rarely does it work logically in these types of ways. And
Very
then it's,
rarely.
yeah, and then it's just a matter of going, all right, especially if you're, let's say, at $100,000 and you want to go to $200,000 and it feels uncomfortable, then you're kind of getting close to your cap, maybe, of what is
Mhm.
comfortable. And your system is going to fight your ability to make money. So, may it be getting a raise, or you've got this new idea for your business, but you just can't seem to get it through. There's all these subconscious ways that your money is, or your mind is going to kind of control and contain and make things that are going to allow you to make more money feel uncomfortable. And again, these are
Mhm.
those patternings that we want you to start identifying so that you can have
Yeah.
agency to make different choices.
Yeah. And sometimes it's as simple as the feelings are just overwhelming to the system.
Right.
Sometimes that's just that. That's what I mean. That's a really great exercise that you just kind of ran people through. And they hit me. It's like if you doubled your salary, then the only thing that might be problematic inside someone is just that the feelings are just too much. They're too overwhelming. And
Hmm.
if you can breathe through that, eventually the system will stabilize and then that can be okay.
Right.
Now the jump from doubling your salary to $1 billion, that might never stabilize inside someone, just depending on the beliefs and the
Right.
identities that are running inside of them.
Right.
But sometimes this is just, the nervous system needs to get out of things where it's just too much, and too much of a good thing is still too much sometimes,
Yeah.
but it can get used to that as well. Just
Right.
kind of depends.
Yeah. And I think that that is
Mm.
so important to notice, or to note, is that it does take some time for integration to allow that nervous
Mhm.
system to kind of get used to it. So I think that's a great point, because a lot of times we move forward and we don't realize that we've actually hit a goal because, oh, well, it was a minor thing. And so we just keep on moving forward. We keep on moving forward. And sometimes it's nice to just kind of hit a goal and then kind of settle in there and
Mhm.
kind of take in that new experience. And where you're at is you're kind of pushing the limits of what your subconscious, unconscious mind is saying is safe, and let it
Yeah.
get used to that and comfortable with it versus just constantly pushing, pushing, pushing until the system just freaks out. And when it freaks out, it'll let you know, by the way. It's not going to be a pleasant experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, although the problem is sometimes when we freak out, we have no idea it's related to what it's related to. Sometimes
Right.
like I just gotta go. I just have to reject this new job offer. I just have
Right.
to whatever it is. And you
Right.
don't know, rationality has left the building, folks.
Right.
We're just
Yeah.
kind of super activated in the moment, and
Mm-hmm.
catching ourselves and kind of snapping ourselves out of that can be a tricky one
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Kind of, it reminds me, what was the horse guy that
Ray
trains
Hunt.
the cowboys? Ray Hunt. He's
Mhm.
he's training a bunch of cowboys on how to listen and pay attention to the horse, and that you don't have to control them, and you don't have to do all these manhandling things, if you will, to horses. You don't have to break the horse. You have to
Yeah.
listen to it and be a part of the horse. And so there's a section where all these people are out in a thing. What's the
Mhm.
word? I can't think of the word. I always lose words. A pavilion, if you will, and they're just a bunch of people riding horses. And
Okay.
finally, a horse starts acting up, and it bucks a guy off. And Ray Hunt laughs. He goes, "Yep, I've been waiting for that horse to do that. Every time you ask it to do something, it gives it to you, and then you just ask for a little bit more, and it gives it to you, and then you just ask for a little bit more. And finally, it said, 'Hey, I've been doing everything you want. Give me a break. Let's, recognize the fact that I'm doing it.' And no, you kept on demanding more and more and more. And finally, the horse said, 'I'm fed up with it,' bucked the guy off. Great
Yeah.
learning experience for
Mhm.
the individual, hopefully. But it's kind of the same thing. Once the critter brain freaks out enough, it'll just may that be a panic attack, may it be making bad decisions where you look back, may it be a week later, 2 weeks later, and you're like, damn, I probably shouldn't have done that, because that just cost me $5,000. Here I was doing so good. I was paying off my bills. I was starting to get above water, all moving towards everything I want. And then I did the
Mhm.
silly thing and it cost me $5,000. And now I'm back where I've been for years that I don't want to be.
Yeah.
That's an indication of the system letting you know that it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. We call that, rapport with self, in that meaning at a high level, just kind of allowing your system to integrate step
Hmm.
by step and being with it through that process, not trying to push too hard because then you're out of rapport with yourself. You're pushing
Right.
too hard and it's going too far. And sometimes you're capable of much more than you are doing and you're out of rapport with yourself because you're underperforming inside yourself and underreaching for things because it doesn't feel as safe or as available inside you than what reality might dictate or make available.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
we can slice this thing anyway. It's tough. It's
All kinds of
tricky.
ways. And as with most things in life, um, it all boils down to what is it that you want, and
Yep.
being very clear on that. Because I think a lot of times people think they know what they want, but then if you ask them and you have a deeper conversation about it,
Hmm.
well, I don't exactly want that, but I want this instead. Or it's like, oh, well, I want to go to college. And then you talk about it. Well, it's really that my family wants me to go to college. It's not that I
Hmm.
want
Yeah.
to go to college. I've just been led to believe that I want to go to college. What I really want to
Hmm.
do is whatever. Move to Costa
Yeah.
Rica and drink coconut milk all day. Okay, go do it.
Mhm.
Can't do that. What's going to happen to my family? What's my family going to think if I do that? I got to go to college. Oh, okay. So there's some belonging issues here that you need to work through.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
And
trying
like
to
you said, it
think
gets
of,
really tricky. It's not
yeah.
necessarily something that you're going to identify yourself, especially if you've been living in your own matrix, which we all do, where you don't
Mhm.
realize that there's all these other options, that there's other ways of thinking. And that's where just talking to somebody from the outside and being able to hear other people's experiences. How many times have a friend told you, "Oh my gosh, you'd be great at blah blah blah," and you're like, I couldn't, I couldn't do that. They see something
Mhm.
because they're not looking through the same filters that you are. They see what is capable, and yet you have a diminished view of something. You're not going to be able to see it, unfortunately, until somebody can kind of crack that
Mhm.
shield and go, look, there's more out there to life. There's more out there to yourself of what you're capable than you thought you were.
Yeah, and those kind of people in your life, if you have them, whether that's, a friend or family member or a professional of some sort, those
Mm-hmm.
people are those people are angels, and you have to keep
Yeah.
them close because,
Yeah.
there's also the opposite out there, people who don't see you properly and will keep you
Right.
small and will keep your view of yourself either stabilized in its limitations or even try to shrink it down even more. It just really
Right.
depends. So, in the way we can relate with ourselves through another person's eyes is an incredibly powerful tool, and it can be incredibly destructive. So, like, knowing how to find the right people to do that is really
Right.
important. And that's where you get leverage on yourself about being able to, like you were saying earlier, know what you want. And then it's like people, sometimes people know what they want and they know why they want it, and that does happen. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times people only have a vague sense of what they might want, and they have
Right.
no idea why they want that or what the actual
Correct.
drivers behind it are. And if you don't have that stuff lined up, like from the beginning, it's going to make it really, really tough to attain, or it's going to make the road more painful or longer or more arduous than it has to
Right.
be.
Right.
So, and if you arrive at getting something that you don't truly want, or you don't fully understand why you want it or what's driving you to it, then getting that thing might actually be a painful experience for you, just
Mm-hmm.
depending. This is what we're been talking about here today.
Right. Right.
It can be tricky and convoluted sometimes as an idea, but we all have the experience in one way or another of like having a positive thing come about, and either that being feeling anxiety provoking in the moment or coming with some sort of like feeling of loss or sadness maybe later that day or the next day or something like that. And it makes no sense, but I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty human thing, and it's a
Right.
pretty common thing actually. And these are the things why we're talking about why this happens. And I don't know, I lost my train of thought,
Yeah.
but
It was a good train.
it's good.
It
Good.
was a good train. It was a good train. Yeah. And I think
Get
it's
on the
it's really
train.
you mentioned something though that I think is really important is you don't know why it happens. And it's in that trying to logically figure things out is part of it's one, we typically then get a little frustrated with ourselves. We tend to beat ourselves up. It's kind of just human nature. Oh, why did I do that? Here I go again. Dun dun dun. And stupid,
Mhm.
stupid, stupid, or whatever the response is. And instead of going down that spiral, if you will, is going,
Mhm.
okay, there's something else unconsciously, there's something else that I'm not aware of going on in my system. How do I identify what that is? And that's something that Will and I both do is we actually work with people
Mhm.
because we're not the people. So we're outside, we can see things, but we're also been trained to go into that deeper understanding of what's going on so you can identify
Mhm.
what those safety patterning is that is preventing you from having what you want. And what's really cool about safety patterns is when you remove them, they're just simply not there. It's
Yep.
kind of like it's kind of like if you go to a paid parking garage where sometime it's free, sometime it's paid. If the little arm is down and you got to put money to get inside, think of an identity belief as that little arm. When it's down, you can't help but notice it. It is going to interfere with you moving towards what you want. And when you remove it, it's like going to the parking lot on a free day. It's just not there. You may not even
Mhm.
remember that there's even a machine over here with an arm. You may not even see it. It's like, oh, I
Yep.
got an open lane. I'm just going to drive through and get the parking spot I want. And
Yeah.
it's when that change happens, it's literally just like that.
Yeah, when the revision has happened, it's
Right.
just revised
Right.
now. And sometimes stuff comes back in lesser ways every once in a while. It just
Mm-hmm.
kind of depends. My experience of just working with people and in my own experience and just kind of observing this world is it seems like the biggest stuff for people tends to circle back around in life.
Right.
Not always, but it happens. But
Yeah.
it's because there's more to be learned from it and more to be revised from it. But the
Right.
wattage goes down each time potentially. But
Mm-hmm.
if you think about our minds, and this is an incomplete metaphor, but it's pretty close. If you think about our minds like lines of code that kind of just command software, when you change the line of code and you hit enter and it just runs and it does what it does. And if you change that around again to do more of what you want, then it just does what it does, which is bring you more of what you want and less of what you don't want. That's what it is. It's not, we can't, the less we think of these patterns inside of ourselves as positive or negative and just as they are what they are, the more useful it can be. And
Yeah.
when you revise it, it's just revised. It's just different. You don't
Right.
have to write post-it notes and stick it on your bathroom
Right.
mirror to remind yourself to be different or to feel positive
Right.
affirmations or something like that. It's just part of your identity has been revised and different, and it feels more safe to be you and more
Mm-hmm.
expressed in the specific way that you were looking for, right?
Right. Yeah.
Again, it always starts with what would you like in your life,
Yeah.
or what do you have going on that you don't want anymore, right? You want to stop dating the 10th abusive person romantic relationship in your life. You want to not have that anymore. That's a
Mm-hmm.
fine outcome too. You can state in the positive eventually, but
Right. Right.
this is how these things work. And what might you lose that you value when you're not dating abusive people anymore? This is
Right.
where that kind of trickiness is like, when you get what you want, how might that be create conflict or dissonance or friction inside yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's conflict inside your system about this,
Right.
even though there's no conflict inside your conscious thinking mind. You know exactly what you want. I don't want to
Yeah.
be in pain anymore. I don't want to be with these abusive, shitty people who make me feel bad about myself.
Right. But
Consciously,
but the good
like up
guys are
front here, that
so
makes
boring.
sense.
Yeah. But those good guys, the ones that my girlfriends would say would be perfect for me, they're just so boring.
That is an unfortunate stabilizer of all this,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Traumatized brains calculate safety with being kind of boring and flat to a certain degree. That's
Mm-hmm.
where it's like traumatized brains and the way trauma plays out. Sometimes people have to find themselves in heightened situations to feel anything. That's
Right.
one of the big drivers around all this. And
Right.
it's strange.
Yeah.
What a strange experiment we are living through.
Yeah. Very
I
much
guess
so.
the
Very
the
much
human
so.
experiment. But
Yeah. Um, and I think as we kind of wind down today's show, ultimately a lot of it, and let me know if you got anything to add on this, Will. I think that for me, there's kind of two things. One is understanding that there are programs running in the unconscious, subconscious mind that are, and they're patterns. They repeat, they repeat, they repeat. They may not always appear connected sometimes. A lot of times patterns can there's a wide range of patterns that's really important. So understanding that there is something going on and being able to, instead of when you start feeling frustrated about yourself, is go, oh, okay, hold it. But maybe there's something else going on that I'm not aware of, and I should dig into that as an alternative option versus just beating yourself up. So I think that's kind of key, one key thing to take away. And then the second one is really getting clear with what is it that you want. And
Yep.
as you become more clear about what you want and you have more alignment within yourself, it's much easier to want what you want, and it's much easier to have what you want because there's no muddiness about it. It's very clean, it's very concise. And I think some of the most successful people in the world, they have a very clear understanding of what it is that they want, or however what it is that they want to portray.
Mhm.
Whatever is pushing that within their system, that's a whole nother conversation, but they are very clear on who their
Mhm.
identity is and what they want.
It's a really interesting conversation because when you actually read about, the deep, like biographical or autobiographical information on the peak performers in whatever, sports,
Hmm.
business, like thought, leadership, whatever it is, you often find that they're pretty traumatized and moving away from something at a
Right.
very profound level. So that's
Yeah.
a really interesting side note. Maybe we'll talk about that some other time.
Hmm.
But you said something important. I would never, ever, ever recommend beating yourself up. I think I don't know if it's a cultural thing or a normal human thing or a natural instinct to kind of beat yourself up because we do it a lot. And I'm not
Hmm.
quite sure where it comes from, but the more you can understand that your mind is just doing what it's been programmed to do, what it has learned about itself to do through the experience of being you in childhood, and also to a certain degree it's like epigenetic payload and ancestral history and cultural history, like all those things come into play,
Right.
absolutely. um, but beating yourself up only makes things worse. It
Yeah.
doesn't actually improve anything because the system's always working. It's making the best option available to itself in the moment right
Hmm.
now. So all we can do is just kind of get in and understand maybe why that line of code or these lines of code are the way they are and revise them so that they just do something different. You don't have
Right.
to yelling at lines of code doesn't revise them. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say
Yep.
in a very simplistic way.
Yeah. No, I think then
And
that's a
actually, will only make it worse somehow. But
right. It's like the line of code is listening and says, I'm going to double down on my coding to make
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, you don't like it? Well, we're just gonna dig in the heels even harder. Yeah, when we resist what our mind has learned to do, it just makes it much more problematic in all kinds
Right.
of ways.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess we should just expect to a certain degree in one way or another, even if it's just this one piece. It's like when we get what we want, it pushes our minds into a new experience of itself, a new like frontier inside of what we
Mm-hmm.
call the map of your reality, and you're
Right.
just in uncharted territory. And that makes minds really uncomfortable. It makes the creature part of our brain tasked with keeping us alive really uncomfortable because anything that's uncharted or unknown isn't proven to be survivable. It's as
Right.
simple as that.
Right.
So when you get what you want, maybe it'll come with a twinge of just like, oh, something feels weird here or something feels off. And then our mind will try to rationalize that and make up a reason for that, which probably is not accurate. Um, but the more we can expect this, the more helpful maybe all of this will be. Just knowing that if you keep breathing and moving through it, usually things will revise itself in terms of like when good things happen, maybe it'll feel bad for a bit, but things can get better.
Hmm.
And then sometimes, and this is a little more of a side note, but sometimes we're pushing really hard to make stuff happen in our lives and in ourselves that are incredibly threatening to our systems. And the more we do that, the worse consequences might come from that too. But that's a more rare case. It's worth mentioning, but it's kind of normal people shouldn't worry about that probably.
All right. Right. All right. Sounds good. Anything else you'd like to add about getting what you want? Why it's so hard?
Well, God, I don't know if it has to be so hard all the time. Maybe we'll just leave it at that. But
Right.
we'll just say, yeah, being you is tricky. We see
Yeah.
that. I feel
Yeah.
like being me is tricky. I think being Ryan
Mhm.
is tricky.
Very
It's
tricky.
but we should not be deterred from getting what we truly want. And it's really important to know what we truly want and
All right.
why we want that, you know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a simple exercise people could do for themselves, an old coaching technique called the 5 whys. And so you write down what you want and say, well, why do I want this? And then whatever you answer that, you say, well, why do I want that? And you just keep asking yourself why 5 or
Hmm.
however many times. And that's a good self exercise people can do if they want to
All right.
start digging into this today.
Once they get to the final why, do you throw in the what will having that do for you? Or do you just stick with the whys all the way down?
Uh, it's the similar idea. I know you can also say instead of why, say, okay, what I want is this. Okay, what will having that do for me? And you
Right.
can answer that and say,
Well,
when
I
I
was
have
just
this, what will
curious.
having this
Yeah, I
do
was
for
just
me?
curious if you did the why all the way down, you're like, okay, I think I've gotten to the bottom, to the deepest level, like because everything starts from the foundation, if you will, right? All
Yeah.
thoughts, all meanings, all belief, they all start with a foundation. So the idea
Hmm.
behind the why is to take this high level topic or idea that you have and go, oh, okay, well, each time you ask why, ideally you're coming down a little bit closer to that foundation. Um,
Hmm.
and it's always fun when, especially when you're first trying to do this and you're really paying attention to yourself in a different way, is did I get all the way down?
Hmm.
And so I just wondering with the 5 whys, it would be interesting if you did the 5 whys and said, okay, and then just add in that one more level, which is in what will having that do for you. And you could open up another vein of options. I don't know. So
Yeah, entirely. I would give it a shot for sure. I
just
would say
something
the
fun to
why
throw out there.
elicits kind of more content rationalizations that can be useful, and what will having that do for you does that, and also can open up the emotional drivers as well.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they're both excellent. Use them in good health. That's
Sounds like a Bill and Ted's Great Adventure. They're both good drivers and use them in good health. I like
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Uh,
All right.
yeah, I would just have to do our best George Carlin impression. Say that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't have one. I just meant that was George Carlin saying that stuff
Yeah.
back in the original movies, right?
Yeah.
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 All right. Awesome. Anything else today? I feel like we covered a lot and we tried to contain the conversation today pretty well.
We kept it contained a bit, although why getting what you want cannot feel so good is a huge topic.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah. I mean,
And hopefully it came clear. It can either just be because it's new and newness is a bit of a threat to the system, and it could be because it pushes against other deeper beliefs and
Yeah.
some other stuff in between. So we'll keep exploring this topic as well.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And we'll do that on Tuesdays in the morning, 10:15
Yep,
a.m.
that's right.
Perfect. All righty, sir. Always good to talk with you. Appreciate it. Until next time, hope everybody out there has a great week.
All right.